Welcome to our Lunch and Learn for January. Today we have Eoin Ryan, who is going to be talking to us about exiting your business for cash. So I'm going to just hand it over to Eoin and we'll go from there.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here to be asked, or maybe I invited myself, I'm not sure, to do this. But I thought it'd be very useful, for some of the people in Ireland Together and further afield. Because anybody that's worked in a business, perhaps it's an aspirational thing down the line to sell your business and sit in the deck chair for the rest of your days, if only. What I suppose, first of all, I'm going to go through this sort of in a bit of a sequence, and I'm going to get to the meat and bone, the fundamentals of selling the business, the structure at the very end. But I suppose, first of all, it's important to explain the business that I had. And from past experience, most people would not be too familiar with it, but they'd know what it is. But they often ask me, how do you make money from this business? So to explain, I set up a sports events business, and at the beginning of it, it was all around organizing road races, which is something like running a 5K, 10K, half marathon. And also triathlons was part of the business as well. At its peak in 2019, I would have had about 12,000 participants who took part in my events that particular year. I started the business back in 2008. So I suppose if you take the pandemic out of it, I would have been in business for 11 straight years doing this. How I made money is going back to that. Was always been asked by people. And really it comes down to two things in that area. One is entry fees, and the second one is sponsorship. Those are the two income streams that you would have, from organizing such events. There can be others as well. Sometimes you get, there's a lot of barter as well, let's just say, for example, with a water company, I might get water at a reduced rate and they would get, an associate sponsorship position. So there's many different ways of skinning a cat. My business philosophy from the very beginning was that once everybody else gets paid, I get paid. And I carried that right through for the duration of time that I was in business. Because the events business is not a surefire thing, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, but you have to reach a certain threshold of break even, then you make a little bit of money, and then hopefully if the numbers come in, it can turn into a good event, as opposed to one where you might say, well, I won't do that again. So I've broken this into three sections, just to put some context around it, and you'll see three different experiences really from what I'm about to say. So I broke it into the good, the bad, and the ugly about that business. So the good part, let's start with the good, of course. That is that how I got into this in the first place was just a stroke of luck, really. And many businesses are started as such, over a conversation or a chance meeting. Well, for me, I was a member of 3D Triathlon Club, and we had a meeting, and the club race was due to come up in a couple of months, and they asked who would like to be the race organizer. Everybody kept their hands on the table, except me. I kind of went, me, I'll try it. And from that point onwards, where I was handed, I suppose, the tools to organize a race, not necessarily a out-and-out event plan, but I discovered I liked it. I discovered I was good at it, and I discovered it didn't feel like work. In fact, I was probably more interested in organizing the triathlon race than I was doing the marketing job that I had at the time. So one thing about events, just to mention, is that they're not for everybody. According to Forbes magazine, and I do believe this to be true, being an event organizer is the 5th most stressful job in the world. Within the top 5, it's the only one that isn't life-threatening. So yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of spinning plates, and a lot of things that can go wrong that you might not have anticipated. But it's about reacting, coolly and calmly when those things do happen, and that may not be in everybody's DNA. So yeah. Yeah, so then I became a technical delegate for Triathlon Ireland, which meant that I actually went around to other triathlon races throughout the country and gained the experience then of seeing how they propose to stage their race. And then with the background knowledge, I suppose I was accumulating over my own racing experience and an interest in it. I became very good at that. So I used to sign off races. So basically, if I said it wasn't safe, or if I gave them recommendations, those recommendations would have to be put in place. Otherwise, it wouldn't be sanctioned by Triathlon Ireland. So I didn't go to university. I didn't do any of that. I really just learned, hands-on on the job. Also, I knew that the market was in a growth phase. I knew it quite well because I was involved in triathlons myself. And I could see that running was on an upward curve as well. The last time there'd been a running boom, as they call it, was back in the 1980s. And sure, lo and behold, 2008 happened, and we sort of ended up back in that sort of position again, where people were not paying for gyms and just looking for something that that they could do themselves outdoors. So as I was working, I probably would have considered myself a disruptor. I was in a market that's dominated by club races and charity runs. I spent a long time explaining to people that I was neither a charity nor a club, which left some people walking away scratching their heads as to how dare you not be one of them, because I was one of the first people to do this. And I was an improver as well. So I turned the races into more of an event than just a race. So there was more to it. If you were coming there for your morning, you were going to be feel like you had an experience, as opposed to like ready, steady, go, and run around that cone, come back, see ya, thanks. So I probably would have done that and been noticed for doing it as well, because it stood out. I was also a trendsetter, and again, that was kind of important as well. So I would have brought in something like the trilogy medals. So you got a medal that would connect together. Sorry, I don't have an example of one here with me, but so you go to one race, you get one part of the medal, and then the next race, you get another part, and the next part. So again, that, again, showing that little bit of initiative, something new, like was always going to capture people's attention in a place where there hadn't been much of that going on. And I was always looking for strategic partnerships. So at one stage, the Irish Independent had a fit magazine, which was like a full color magazine. It was out every week. And I would have been, closely involved with those guys. So I was always looking to see what's next, what's the next trend, what can we do here? Small claim to fame is that when I did start my business, people were paying 10% online fee for to enter a race. So if it cost you €10, it was costing you another euro to just pay for the online fee. I quickly told the main company that was dominating the market, like, that isn't going to happen. So it's now down around 6-5%, whichever one you work with. So I suppose I've saved people a few bob over the years by bringing that in. So also, as a risk taker, you have to be a risk taker when you start a business. It's a risk. I mean, there's no guarantees that this is going to work. I wasn't afraid to fail, and many of my races did fail, and they're in the archives of history. One of them being Ironman, which I'll talk about in a minute. I had the Crack Assault course and the Dublin 10 km. Gone, oblivion. And my marketing background was a great help for this, because it allowed me to bring a bit of professionalism to this, where, as I mentioned, it was up to this point really just a charity and a club area, where people, like in the charity, people were working for a wage, to make the events happen. But in the club sense, you had volunteers, and they were doing what needed to be done. But having me there in the mix, was something, I suppose, that just changed the dynamic, because everybody was doing what everybody else was doing for such a long time that anything new kind of stood out. And the last and most important thing is I'm a very hard worker. And I think that's, you know, my passion was in this space. And that makes it so much easier, because, you know, if you can say that expression, which sometimes, you know, I know many people go, bleh. It's like, you know, if you find what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life. It's true to a certain extent, but like, you know, we're not always, you know, happy, passionate, and things are going sweetly for us. But there definitely is an element of truth to it. And, you know, when the days are tough, it's easier to turn up and respond and, you know, to keep going. So that's important as well. So I'll move on to the bad. That's all the good stuff. That all sounds great and, you know, lovely. So in the bad news was, or how I got into this, if you consider it bad news, probably it wasn't, but at the time it was, I was made redundant in 2008. So even though I had the vision for a business, Humpty Dumpty was pushed. You know, I had to do something. So I was out in the cold in 2008, and the crash had just happened, and I'm not joking, there wasn't a single job. Even if I wanted to go back into the marketing area, there wasn't a single job available. So I was kind of in terms of a casino and betting at the tables, I was all in. This had to work. So I had to sign up straight away. So I was on social welfare for you know, for months. My first pay, so this was in June of 2008. So I didn't get my first paycheck, if you like, until February of 2009. So I had to survive through that. I had a mortgage. I just bought a house in 2006. So what I did was I took in 2 tenants. I slept on the floor downstairs, you know, for a couple of years. I worked in the sitting room on I didn't have a laptop at the time. I had a computer that, you know, like it wouldn't look out of place in a museum, and, you know, but you get on with it. Like, I mean, what you have, you use, and it worked, and I had an internet connection. 14-hour days would not have been irregular. And that was never really a badge of honor. It was more like, you know, I have to do this, you know, I have to make a success of this. Plus, it didn't feel like work. You know, I go back to that thing about when you work in something that you're really passionate about and you know you have an interest in. And for years, I was looking for this as well. So it wasn't just sort of a light bulb moment. Yeah, let's be an entrepreneur. I think it was always going to be that way. I was always looking. And when I found that, I was going to keep it, and I was going to hold on to it as preciously as I could. So, yeah, so long story short, money was tight. You know, at the start, I remember one time I was, I took out a stand in a UK triathlon and running exhibition show. And it was very expensive to do this. It was a big risk because, you know, it was a new race, and it was the UK when people come across. So anyway, to cut costs, like, you know, and I think you hear this story quite often, but this one is genuinely true. I hired a car, and I couldn't afford the hotels around the area. So I decided I was going to sleep in the car overnight. And that particular night, it pelted down snow. It was Baltic. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget leaving the expo because other people were going to the black tie thing. It was quite high brow, this expo. And everybody was going, you know, getting dressed and, you know, ready. And there's your man heading off to, he's like, you know, he's Nissan Micra to sleep for the night. But look, these are funny stories you look back on, you know, but it's not that they make your business any better, like, you know, but you kind of appreciate, I suppose, where you've come from, you know, when you have stories like that. Woke up in the morning, I'm not joking, barely able to move, I was so cold. But anyway, moving on. So my first event, this is the thing about the events as well, like, you know, even though the company started in June of 2008, it's going to take time to, you know, to go through the processes with councils and various different bodies to get permission. So my first event was never going to be in 2008. It was always going to be in 2009. So there's that lag period, and that's why I signed on, as mentioned. So my first event was the Wexford Half Marathon in 2009. And then Clontarf half marathon happened in the summer of 2009. So that's the bad, and it's not so bad, really, is it? I mean, look, these are the things that we do to set up a business. You know, when we really feel like this is something we're passionate about, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to get on to the ugly. Not everything goes according to plan. Even with the best of efforts, even with, like, you know, all the 14-hour days, even with all that stuff that you put in, like, you know, things can go wrong. And unfortunately for me, I built the business around the Ironman triathlon. And it was, I suppose, it is deemed a failure. What happened was there was a rough sea on the day. This was something like the 26th of August in Courtown in Wexford. I mean, we just don't get storms, you know, at that time of year in Ireland. It's okay, things have changed a bit now, but it's just, it wasn't the norm. And as a result, we weren't able to do the swim part of it. And we had 4 different triathlon races on at the same day, which I don't think has been repeated. So there was lessons to be learned from this, but there were hard, tough lessons at the time. So some participants went off course as a result. You know, we tried to rearrange things, and horrible day. And of course, the participants weren't happy. While all of that was happening, the best laid traffic management plan in the world had gone just belly up. It just wasn't being implemented properly. So even though that wasn't my direct responsibility, like, I mean, I would have been involved in the designing of it, the execution of it, of course, I wasn't involved in. But however, long story short, when it came to the review meeting with the council and the various other bodies that were invested into the event, I mean, to put it in context, I mean, we were on the RTE news the day before. You know, this is going to be a big tourist attraction for Ireland. Like, this is bringing in, like, we were bringing in athletes. We had brought in athletes, I should say, from America, professionals, etc., etc., etc. So I, you know, really bet big on this. And anyway, the long and short of it was, when we had the review meeting, it, you know, we were told that we wouldn't get permission again, you know, to close the roads, and that was pretty much that. I mean, again, like, you know, it was a massive fall, you know, massive dent in my confidence too. I mean, unfortunately, the event actually made the front page of the 2 local newspapers. Triathlon causes traffic chaos, you know, so a very hard one to take, considering the efforts that went into building it. What was at stake for myself, you know, because you know, you know, I'd seen this as my future, and it all basically came crashing down. So business is not always, you know, smooth. So the only thing to do really was to pick myself up from that, and, you know, well, one thing I did do actually, and it was, if I was talking about healing from such a traumatic experience, was that I took responsibility for the whole thing. I did not back down. I did not say to anybody, nope, it was that guy. He was the marshal that sent you the wrong way, and he was from X club. No, I said, listen, this is on me. Even the traffic management plan, I said, listen, in the meeting, I wasn't going to point fingers as easily as I could have, you know, just to take a little bit of spotlight away from myself. No, it was my gig. I set it up, and I'm responsible for this. And you know, some people will have never forgiven me for it, and some people have, you know, said, look, fair dues, you know, you can't control the weather, but, you know, yeah, there's a few things that could have been better on the day. So anyway, so as a result, I backed out of triathlons. I realized, okay, if you're going to be a one-man show, Owen, stick to something that's a one-man event. So I left triathlon after that, and I stuck with road races. But I did bring in an assault course actually at one stage, which equally wasn't too successful either. Unfortunately, another marshalling error kind of killed that off. So it's my business is quite strange, because you could spend months in the preparation side of things, be extremely professional, and you know, have amazing sponsors, and, you know, build up the expectations of the people who are coming along. And then technically you do give away control of the event to some people whose names you don't even know, because they are working in conjunction with a voluntary group. So the only person I really have direct contact with would be the chief event organizer. sorry, not the chief event organizer, chief marshal. And then you rely on them to pass the correct information down. So it's a funny one like that, you know, that you hand away so much control of something that's so important, you know, to so many people that, you know, you don't know their backgrounds, you don't know really anything about them. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, I kept doing what I was doing because I still loved it. I still believed, despite that, you know, serious bump along the way, I still knew that this is what I really like doing. And, you know, and I just had to work a little bit smarter and realize my limitations, and, you know, remember that like the two events that I had previous to that, the Wexford Half Marathon and the Clontarf Half Marathon, were successful. So, you know, there's something in this. So, yeah, one interesting thing was along the way, like I did end up going back to contract marketing work for probably about 5 years after that. So it was a very seasonal business. I hadn't made the full leap. I made the full leap between 2008 and 2009, of course, because it was just so much work to be done to get that triathlon, you know, established to that level. But I did go back to contract work for five winters subsequent to that. So the business was doing well, but it wasn't doing well enough, shall we say, or it was structured over a certain number of months, and then there was just very little happening in the wintertime. So one thing that happened, and it's probably an interesting one for anybody that's in business, is to talk to someone who knows very little about your business, and you'd be amazed at the blind spots that they will see that you've not seen before. And I have an example of this, and it was the thing that actually crowned my business. And that was one day I was talking to my neighbor, excuse me, whose trailer I used to borrow. He's a builder. And I was just after coming back from a successful Clontarf Half Marathon that had sold out. And he said to me, he says, "Oh, how did it go?" I said, "Really well, sold out, happy out." And he just said to me, he says, "Okay." He says, "Well, why don't you do it again?" And then the established norm within the events area was that you do things once a year, and that's it, you're done. So it was almost like a eureka moment. Yeah, absolutely. Why don't I do that twice a year? I mean, just because nobody else does it doesn't mean I can't do it. So just thinking outside of the box, you know, with his you know, suggestion. So that's when I started doubling up and having 2 Clontarfs every single year. The second one was in July. That was established. Keep that. And then strategically, I put another one at 3 weeks after the Dublin City Marathon, because I knew a lot of people would be looking for an event to do subsequent to the marathon if they were feeling good after the marathon. Turned out to be a great move. And then I repeated that with a couple of other events. That was the point where now I had like a full annual business. So amazing what, like, you know, a little tip from someone who's outside of the space, like, I mean, where it can take things. Because I think a lot of us, like, I mean, perhaps I'm talking for myself here, like, I mean, we tend to sort of box ourselves in with, you know, with the established norms. It's such a simple thing when, you know, when you hear it now, like, you kind of go, "Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense." But anyway, okay, so moving on to the pandemic, because I said I'd mentioned this, or it was in the advert for the sell your business for cash. So the pandemic naturally hit me very hard as an events business. We were the first to close and the last to open. And I can remember distinctly, as I knew, the first moment I heard about the pandemic on the news, which would have been around November time, you know, prior to our lockdowns, I knew this was going to be a major thing. I just knew it, and I just thought to myself, "Oh heck, this is going to probably destroy the events businesses that are out there, depending on how long it lasts, of course." So I remember coming up to the very first lockdown, and I knew the trend was that everything stops at 6 o'clock. I had an event on a Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, the 16th of March. And and it was the night run. So that it was due to start at 7:20 p.m. So I was highly aware that at any stage, Leo Varadkar could say, that's it, tools down, everybody, you're going home. And it's amazing, like, the small little bits of luck that you have, if luck is the right word, because that was my first event of the new season, we'll call it, And had that event not gone ahead, I mean, the lockdown ended up happening on the 18th, Thursday the 18th at 6 o'clock in our abouts. And had that night run not gone ahead on a Tuesday night, I mean, I would have been in a precarious financial situation, because I would have had to refund or offer refunds to everybody, that was participating. So, it was one of those ones where, you're worried about the pandemic, but you're also worried about your business, and there's many different emotions that come with that. And of course, people are asking you as well, like, is it going ahead? Is it not? And is it the right thing to go ahead? So many ethical questions, had to face for that particular thing. So yeah, it's not just a case of putting on an event and hey presto, there it is. There's a lot of layers to the onion behind it, which is probably why it is the 5th most stressful job in the world. But I have to say all credits to Catherine Martin and her team, in the government for the supports that they put in place for the events industry. Because I know for myself, for one, like, it could have easily have rendered my business worthless, if they weren't put in there, because, there was the income that was coming in was just a pandemic unemployment payment. And, trying to live on that was tricky in itself. So, I honestly do and would like to say, like, thank you to them for doing that. Talking to other event organizers as well, it actually saved our bacon, and it gave us an opportunity to come back and to still be here. So that's it on the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, of course, there's time to reflect. I started to realize that the way I operated my business was as a solopreneur. I never have had however you say it, any staff. I was thinking of hiring somebody, I suppose, coming on the back of 2019 and having a really good year, but obviously that didn't come to pass. But I realized how I managed the business, was not something I could sustain long term. So I've been doing this for 11 years. I was probably losing a little bit of the love. In my line of work as well, I suppose a point of differentiation from most people's jobs is that every time you organize an event, you have to be prepared that somebody may not come back. Now, that's a very morbid, statement, but it's very true. And over the years, I've events that I've attended myself, unfortunately, the loss of life, is a very realistic thing. So how would I deal with that was, I had time to reflect and ask myself those questions. At this stage, over 100,000 people had been involved in my events over the 11 years. Law of averages, there's no sense to what I'm saying here now, but it could happen in the first event, but I just thought, well, I don't know if I'd like that responsibility, even though, of course, all the events are very well checked, but it's just a case of not being able to get there quick enough or whatever the case might be. So yeah, a lot of I suppose a lot of reflection on what was going on. So I decided to see if I could sell the business. Was it my time? Was it my time to go? I felt like it was. I was losing a bit of the love for it. My back was getting a bit sore as well, because I took on a lot of the work myself. I had it down to a fine art whereby I could probably be in 2 places at one time and make it happen. So what did I have then at the end of 13, or it would have been 13 years, I suppose. Well, I had 7 events. Some of them were repeats. I mentioned Clontarf happened twice. So I had 7 events that were very well established, and most of them sold out. So for any particular buyer, that would be very attractive, because you are now buying into goodwill, reputation, database, all those things in a business that and well established too. So that was, I suppose, and also I was in 3 different counties, so there was an opportunity there with sponsors, you know, to take it outside of Dublin and reach into the East Coast. So I had Wicklow, Wexford, and Dublin were kind of my turf. So, and I had many paid sponsors as well. One thing I've been very successful with, which was, you know, a throwback from my marketing days, was that I was very good at bringing sponsors in, and having a sponsor at an event is in some ways, like, I mean, it's like a cherry on top, because you're going to do the event anyway. So if you can get sponsored for it, like, I mean, magic, you know. And of course, having a sponsor can create its own image of the event too, and a good association can, you know, can help with your own call it event personality that each one has. So yeah, so over the years, a lot of participants, I suppose the early mistakes were probably forgotten about at this stage, and so the business was in a good place. When the lockdown happened, I had a lot of participants who didn't ask for refunds. I was straight off the blocks. I offered people a refund. I thought it wasn't fair, like, I mean, that I'd be holding on to their money. I think that got, you know, that sort of set a very good ethical precedent out there in the sports events area, because many people, you know, were wondering, like, you know, we all didn't know what was going to happen, but I offered it. But like most of the pandemic time, then I would have spent, you know, refunding people. I had many false starts as well with, you know, okay, let's go with this date, and hopefully it'll have passed through by this stage, only to be kicked back. And, you know, you put in a lot of work, meetings, etc., and unfortunately it doesn't happen. So yeah, all of those things, sorry, I'm kind of going back now on, you know, the why to sell. So yeah, combination of those. So how am I doing for time? Okay, so let's talk about the sale. Let's get into the meat of it all. I've written down a few notes on this. Just I want to try and give a little bit of order to it. So bear in mind, as we all know at this stage, we're talking about a very niche business here that not many people would be familiar with. They'd know that it exists, but they probably, you know, as mentioned before, one of the most common questions I was asked is, how do you make money out of that? So when I was putting together the proposal, like, I mean, I was very aware that, like, I mean, this is not something you're going to go to everybody, you know, to see if they're interested in, or anybody that's loosely connected. This was always going to be some company who's either like in this space right now, or else it's going to be somebody who, you know, is a supplier to this business. You would need to know this business if you're going to buy it, because otherwise you could get like an awful lot of tire kickers and time wasters, and you don't want that. Especially, you know, the other side of it as well. Like, I mean, when it's a bit nerve-wracking when you say I'm for sale, because you don't really want, you know, your participants to know this. Will it affect entries? So it's something that I try to keep under the radar as much as possible. So I contacted suppliers, and I contacted competitors. So probably about 6 in total in Ireland. And I had an agent in the UK who was talking to various UK companies. And the plan was that I was going to give him a commission, you know, if the sale was made to a UK business. So a takeaway from that is, and very often I've seen this happen, is that competitors become very competitive. I always found it was better to be friends, you know, to wish everybody well, and you know, and good luck to you if you get more entries than I do, or if you start a new event, than, you know, treat them as, you know, the opposite, you know, that we are in a small pool, which we are, of people. So like, oh, you got that person, I wanted them. So just my approach was different. And with my suppliers as well, it came back to that thing that, you know, everybody gets paid before I get paid. And I think because of that, like, I had very loyal suppliers. In fact, some of them never even did a price increase over the 11 years, would you believe? Because they just knew straight away, Owen's going to you know, pay us. He's going to ask us for the invoice, as opposed to we wait, you know, to send it. Yeah, so relationships and loyalty were always very important to me, because you're in a space where you get one opportunity to get this right, and that's the nature of the events business. Perhaps that's the stressful side of it as well. It's not like theater. You can do a rehearsal. You get one opportunity, boom, it happens, or boom, it doesn't. Quite simply put. So to put together a team for selling the business, I got a solicitor who had experience in selling businesses. And that's very important, because, everybody is an expert, everybody's a broad expert in everything. But this now is selling possibly the most important thing I will ever sell in my life. So this had to be done properly. And even if it meant spending an extra few bob, on a specialist, so be it. No issue with that whatsoever, because this is going to be a sale that's going to change my life. So therefore, I want this to, once the train gets in motion, I don't want it to get derailed because they don't know what they're doing. Also, and very importantly, I hired an accountant consultant who again have experience in this particular area. The company, sorry, just to give, I have no issue giving the names. I went with O'Connor Solicitors for the solicitors, and I went with Cooney Carey for the accountants. And again, I think, I had an accountant, but I knew his experience was not in this particular area. I discussed it with him, and I just got a sense, okay, listen, he's probably going to have to go and ask somebody. That's not what you want. You want someone who does this on a regular basis. So when the unforeseen things come up, that they're in control, they know what they're doing. And of course, the buyer also needs to engage a solicitor and an accountant as well. So, right. So, it's very important as well. Or sorry, not that it's very important, but it does help to know as well that your particular buyer has experience in buying a business before, because as scary as it might be for the seller, if the buyer has no experience either, they might, get the cold feet, or the fear or something like that as well. So it helps to know, what they've done in the past, and that information just kind of comes from coffee chats more than anything else, rather than going in and sort of saying, okay, I have a list of questions here. Do you, I think, getting to know the person at the other end, and I did actually because it's a small industry, I did know the person that I was selling to. And I think that really helped both him and me, I must admit. So most people who will be in the buyer seat, they're going to look back over the last 3 years of accounts. So having your accounts up to date, obviously crucially important. I mean, that you've no issues with a tax man. In my case, it was important for them to know that there was no insurance claims that were in existence, because you can claim back retrospectively on an event for a couple of years. I think it's 3 years or something like that, which is a bit mad. So you could get an unexpected letter in the post, but I knew that there was nothing, and to be able to confirm that with the passing of time with the pandemic and the lockdowns and stuff, it was almost 2 years since an event had happened. So again, it made it easier just to confirm that was the case. Yeah. Also, yeah, it helps when somebody is in that space, because they'll know your business pretty well, and they might be able to see opportunities that you haven't seen before. And that ended up being the case. And it's funny, because that's a true test then, of your commitment to sell, because somebody suddenly gives you an idea, almost like the conversation with the builder. And then if you are ready to sell your business, when you think to yourself, well, okay, that could bring in X amount. Yeah, I like that one, let's roll on here for a little bit. But no, I'd none of that. So I'd made my peace with the fact that that I did want to sell, and I had an interested buyer here as well, which again, they don't grow on trees either. So it was a case of take the opportunity when it's there. So let me see what else. Yeah, also what made it easy, I suppose, from a due diligence point of view, is that I just myself, I'd no staff, I'd no debts, and I'd one shareholder, which was me. So it made it very easy then, like, and quick decisions could be made. So as a result, it was easier to get the sale through, because most businesses probably take a minimum of a year for the dance to happen between the solicitors and everything else. Whereas in my case, it was 8 months, which is particularly fast, for a business, and a sizable business too. So that having that stuff, not having that stuff, I should say. And then, of course, having up-to-date books and a credible presentation, which, of course, because the person was in the industry, was able to go, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. I don't have too many questions about it, but I can understand, how this works, and how it, how you see the performance or the opportunities as well. So, so what else makes it attractive to sell? Well, if you sell a business, you qualify for entrepreneur's relief. And that basically means that you pay 10% of the sale to the taxman. So, say for example, you sell a business for 100,000, you will receive 90,000 of that, and 10% goes to revenue. The only thing about that is that you have to front end the 10%. So, you need to take that into consideration when you're doing your deal, that you are able to actually furnish the 10%, to pay revenue. So you're allowed the entrepreneur's relief up to 1 million. So every single one of us, has that at the moment. It has changed over the years. It started out at, I think, at 33%, but it's 10% at the moment. So, it's a good time to sell, I guess, because I don't imagine it'll go any lower. How I valued the business was at 3 times profit. 3 times profit over a 3-year period. Now, some people look at the revenue, but revenue is a flattery figure, because what happens, what you bring in, and then what you spend to bring that in, you might only be making a margin of 5%, so your profit then, is obviously quite considerably lower than your revenue. So there's no hard and fast to this, but that's how we did it. So over the past 3 years, what was the revenue? What was the profit? And 3 times that. I would probably guess we on the average of the 3, we're probably in agreement of the number that it ended up being. So that's how I valued the business and pitched it as such. Obviously, I pitched it with the opportunities to grow as well, which I was aware of. I did a new event that had just pretty much happened. The potential was obvious in it, and again, because I was speaking to someone who knew the event and where it could go, I was talking to an open book on that. So you're selling something that already has an opportunity to grow in a fairly tangible way. So most people would love to get a check in their hand. There you go, Owen. Thanks very much, and you walk away. But that realistically is not going to happen for most businesses. For me, it was like a phase payment. So, and phase payment was based on shares. So every time I got, a payment, he would own more of the percentage of the company. So eventually you get to that tipping point of 50% or 60%. So now you're the minority shareholder in the company. And that's I just, on a general level, that's where it gets a bit nervy for someone who's selling a business, because many businesses that are sold, generally speaking, the last payment never materializes, because, and there's very little you can do about it, to be totally honest. There's a lot of goodwill and a lot of trust when you even though the solicitors are there and you've done the agreements, but if somebody decides to go a bit rotten on it, there can be that issue. And I do know of people who have sold their businesses and never got the last check and never will. Fortunately, I did. And part of, I think that did come down to the relationship with a particular person as well. But also, I made sure that I was still useful in the business as well. So, for example, I was teaching his new people how to organize various races. So therefore, it was in his interest, I suppose, to keep me happy because the race was coming up, and he, it was needed to be a success for him for for the following years. So yeah, trust is a massive thing, and you really do have to look across the desk at the other person, and wonder, can you trust them? And if you can find out as much as you can about the particular person in a I suppose, PI kind of a way, it's important because it is the biggest transaction you'll probably make in your life. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm conscious of the time, and I have been speaking nonstop for like nearly 50 minutes, and I hope it's been helpful. But if you have any questions, please shoot them my way.
Thank you so much, Eoin. I mean, this gives me lots to think about for sure. But one of the questions I had was about knowing that you were selling to the right person. And you just mentioned there that there needs to be trust, and that's still risky. Can you give a little more, like, I'm curious, is this someone you had worked with as, your supplier, but had you partnered with them before, so you saw them in action? Or did you really have to go on like reputation of that particular person? Like, how did you know this was the right person to sell to?
Yeah, great question. I was fortunate. I know the guy personally, so we go back a long way. He was a supplier of mine. When he started off in his business, and this is a great story for him. He asked me one day, would I hire stuff from him? And I said, absolutely, of course, and now he's kind of bought me out. So yeah, so we know each other for quite a number of years. He has bought other businesses as well. So, he was ticking that box, that he had the experience to do this, and he had the ambition to do it as well. But I did, I had other people. I had another guy who was very clearly interested. But as soon as I shook hands with, the person who ended up buying the company, that was it. I knew it was going to happen. Oh, don't worry, I had my doubts too, because pandemics, things like that. But no, for the most part, I felt very confident about it.
And Eoin, when you made the decision to sell, did you have a plan in your mind as to what was going to come next for you after you've sold? Or did you just think, well, I'll figure that out when the time comes?
Yeah, I've yeah. Gosh, this could turn into a 2-hour thing. Yeah, Teresa, this has afforded me the opportunity now to do something completely different, and I'm embracing that slowly, I might add. But yeah, I've always had the ambition to help people to be I work as a wellness coach. It's more like a shop window at the moment than it's actually happening. So that's why I'm doing the postgraduate in employee wellness. So I'm almost catching up with myself in some ways, to now go on and do something that's completely different. And but I can indulge a little bit in a hobby. It's not really a hobby, but I've written a play, and that is a very important message in it, and I'm very passionate about that. And I was consciously aware that I would never get the opportunity to do it if I was to carry on in the business, with what I was doing day to day. It just wouldn't have afforded me that opportunity. So and I'm also daddy daycare as well, so I'm getting the opportunity to be with my kids. So it's nice. But at the same time, I must admit, it doesn't suit my personality not to have something to aim for. So whichever one of those two things I mentioned there, I suppose develops, either one would be great.
Oh, and I was just thinking, as you were talking, there's a lot of vulnerability in being an entrepreneur, both from the beginning and some of it is, because of the naivety of doing everything for the first time, right? So you force yourself into these vulnerable moments like sleeping in the car, but also then it follows through to putting your business out there and putting a valuation on it, which is, as a creative person, is quite a vulnerable thing to do, because when you create something, you feel so close to it that it's something like a child. We don't tend to want to distance ourselves from it and kind of go, okay, and package that child up and sell it on. It's almost too close. So, with the benefit of hindsight, would you embrace that vulnerability again? Do you enjoy it? Do you think it's part of the process, or would you do something different?
So you ask me, would I change my mind?
Well, would you be as vulnerable? Looking back, do you think that's been a benefit to you in terms of your willingness to embrace the discomfort?
I think, do you know what? I think it's like learning on the job. Not every event was a success, as we know, and with that comes experience. And it's not nice, but you kind of, I suppose, get a sense that, look, nothing is permanent. You can get over this. You can roll on. I could certainly have lived in my head for a very long time after Airman, and some of the comments, on chat forums, were very, very sharp and cutting. And if I was to take them personally, I might have climbed under a rock and never appeared again. But I was going to live on my terms as best as I could, and let the penny fall where it falls. But at the same time, you make your own luck in life, and if you're not willing to take a chance, then nothing will change. And you do have to be brave. I mean, there's a lot of bravery in being an entrepreneur, more than people imagine, because the safety net is not there. You're not guaranteed success. So I
think it's a really important message that you've just said there, in terms of, you make a mistake, you fail, you own it. It's not that simple. It does hurt, it cuts deep, but you let those wounds heal and you do it all over again, as opposed to, using the scars to prove that you will never do that again, or you'll never go there again, or you'll never be that brave or that naive or that whatever, So I'm guessing what I'm hearing from you is you're willing to embrace that vulnerability again, just in a new way. And maybe it's the play, maybe that's it.
It is, yeah. The play is the thing that interests me the most. I mean, this is possibly a psychological problem that I have. The higher the risk, the more I'm attracted to it. So yeah, putting myself out there as an actor in my own play, is, it's way out of my comfort zone, but it's the one that attracts me more than the employee wellness, where it's very much a structured job, if you like. So perhaps us entrepreneurs, it's in our DNA, the crazy gene, where we go looking for trouble, or we can shoulder it. I think that's important. Everything's relative,
Well, if it does, what's the saying? If it doesn't scare you, then it's just not big enough, or
Yeah,
but interest you anyway.
There's people that are never going to watch this video anyway, who would run a mile from that sort of mentality. They just want safe, secure, hassle-free life. But that's not for everybody.
But I will say that a lot of creative people might then, leave something undone. So what you've done is you've boxed up your company, put a bow on it, and put it up for sale. And there's a lot of people that will not go through that process and will just move on to something else. And so what do you think it is about you that stopped and put the effort in to actually get some value out of it? Is it the fact that you felt you'd invested so much in it and you knew there was value in it, or does it come from a different place?
Oh no, I certainly knew there was a lot of value in the business. I mean, I would have been the biggest independent road race organizer in the country. And that didn't happen by accident. So yeah, I don't know. I think everybody would like to change. what they're doing at some stage in their life, but few people get the opportunity to do it. And even if I perhaps didn't sell the business for its absolute top end value, so what? You know, I've now afforded myself that opportunity to do something else and maybe do it better.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you know, I suppose it depends on your aspirations and your levels of comfort, you know, with doing something like that. I don't know. I think possibly because of my experience, which is in the play where I talk about surviving suicide, I think it's given me a realization that, look, it's a cliche. We're only here once. Why not, you know,
Lean in.
go for it?
Yeah.
It's scary, yeah, sure, but like the rewards, I suppose that's the other thing that's relative. The rewards for the higher the scare, that, you know, the more rewarding it actually is. If it works, but there's no guarantee that it'll work. Or, you know, if you believe in it enough, which I think is what happened in my business, you know, you can bounce back from the setback that happened very early on, and it just still feels right despite that, you know. And so it's kind of like when you know, you know.
Yeah.
How far are you into the play process? Where are you at with it?
It's written, and I've handed it over to someone whose opinion I would value, and sorry, a couple of people whose opinions I'd value have helped me with it. So I'm possibly looking for just one more round of opinion, if that's the way to say it, before I kind of go, right, that's it, do it all. So yeah, I'm determined to do it. I mean, it's just so interesting, so challenging.
I watched your TED talk as well. I think you're going to be great.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Oh,
I
thanks,
really
Teresa.
I really enjoyed the TED talk. It was good. Good delivery. So I can imagine you in the play a little bit now, having seen you doing your TED talk.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I mean, like, you have no idea how much that helps when you're in that like unfamiliar zone that I'm in right now. You know, to hear like a little bit of encouragement, you know, it means so much. Like, I mean, wow, like, I mean, it's gold.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Eoin. I think
you're
sorry, go ahead, Teresa.
I was just saying, keep us informed of what's going on with.
I'd love to, yeah, I'd love to. I mean, it's just, it's a journey, isn't it? You know, and it's not a journey that everybody will take. I fully appreciate that, because, you know, it's just not possible. Like, you know, so if I can be the talisman for the journey, like, you know, that others would like to come on and, you know, share the experience. Like, I mean, yeah, I'll happily do that, you know.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think there's so much to consider here, and what you provided. Got lots of thinking on how you deal with that passion change as well. It seems like you bring a lot of grace to yourself as you're going through your own journey and realizing what you want to give up, what you need to give up, and where you want to put your effort in. So there's a bit of modeling here that is definitely making an impact on me as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you. It was really good to attend. Very interesting.
Thanks, Teresa.